Hi, good morning. This is Captain Drew Cavanaugh of Florida Inshore Fishing Charters, Mosquito Lagoon Sight Fishing Charters, located here in East Central Florida. And today what we're going to do is we're going to do another series on the 7-part series, How to Catch Redfish, Trout, and Black Drum. And this is going to be a tackle selection, lures and bait, and just rod and reel selection. So what I'm going to talk about today is, again, like in the other videos I've said, I'm specifically targeting the areas that I know in this Mosquito Lagoon, the Indian River, Florida type of fishing. For those of you that are targeting these species, say, I don't care if you're in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, other parts of the state of Florida, each one's going to be different, and I can't answer questions on somebody saying, hey, Captain, we're going out of North Carolina to go for redfish. What tackle do you suggest? Because I'm using light tackle here, 10-pound braid, 15-pound leader. Out where you're doing it, you may need something different. So I'm going to talk about those of you that are targeting these fish in areas that's similar or relative to what we're doing here. So the first thing is it's light tackle. Whether it's fly rod or spin rod. Let's talk about fly rod first. There's no reason in the state of Florida, I'm pretty much sure, that you would need to be targeting redfish with a 10 weight, 11 weight, 12 weight. It's just, it doesn't happen. Typically, I'm going to say the best overall rod and reel that you should choose for fly fishing for these species, whether it's redfish, trout, and drum. Yeah, redfish get pretty big, but I would say an 8 weight, maybe a 9 weight. So if you're willing to go two different ways, get you 7 and 8 weight, 8 and 9 weight, weight forward floating line since it's shallow water when you're backcountry fishing, and just use your judgment as far as quality of gear and how much you want to spend. Now on spinning tackle selection, you can use, I get questions all the time, is what's a good overall combo? Well, a 4,000, a 2,500, that's a toss-up. If I had to pick one, I'd almost have to go with the 4,000 just for the fact that I can always catch smaller fish on that. The problem is using a 2,500 all the time. What happens if you get a 30-pound, 40-pound redfish? It puts a lot of stress on that reel. So it just depends on what you're targeting. If you're targeting 10, 12-pound fish, 15-pound fish all the time, maybe every now and then a 20, 25-pounder, you could probably get away with the 2,500. Braid, I use braid exclusively, whether it's 10-pound, 15, or 20-pound. I normally don't go any above 20-pound on the 4,000s, on the sustains or stratics. Unless you're tarpon, juvenile tarpon, or bigger tarpon. My 6,000 and 8,000 sustain and stratics, they're lined with 60 and 80-pound braid, 100-pound leader. But then again, that's not what we're talking about here. That's like saying, well, I'm going for cobia, or I'm going for grouper. We're talking about redfish, trout, and black drum. 7 foot, 6.5 foot, 7.5 foot, medium light, medium heavy action. Rod, I use the St. Croix Legend Elites. So that's, again, almost preference. If you're just wanting to throw top water quite a bit, you're going to want to get a fax action. If you're going to use a live bait, get you a little bit heavier rod. So, stick within a parameter there. So Shimano, I use Shimano, so I mentioned Shimano a lot, 2,500 or 4,000s. For those of you that are just maybe going for smaller fish constantly, you could look at a 2,000, even a 1,000 series. For those of you that may be in an area and you're in Florida and you're going for snook every now and then, maybe you want to get a 5,000. So again, think of the size of the fish. The fish that I'm using out here, pretty much every rod and reel I've caught, every fish out here on the Mosquito Lagoon has been with a Series 2,500 or a Series 4,000. So that's where you stand with the rod and reel selection as far as fly rod and spin rod. So now let's talk about bait. You got live bait and artificial bait. For those of you that like to live bait, on the Mosquito Lagoon in Florida and inshore fishing here, you got a few different choices. We have a big mullet population out here, lots of finger mullet. So you can always catch live mullet. You can use cut bait. Ladyfish works great, cut ladyfish. I know when it's the summertime, we're out there fishing and we're catching ladyfish. I'm always like, no, let's not let it go. I'll take it home and freeze it. A buddy of mine, a colleague of mine, he's told me to take it and salt it down first and then freeze it. He says when you cut it up, after you freeze it, it retains the integrity of the fish. I haven't tried that yet, so the next ladyfish I get, I'm going to try, I guess, to cure it is what he's doing. So thanks, Tony. Appreciate that. The next thing that you can do is I use a lot of crab. I catch either a fingering crab myself, little crabs like this, the hand selects that I can throw to redfish when I'm sight fishing. I know people that take the big blue crab, they cut them in half, whether they're frozen, you know, hook the hook through the corner of the crab, cut them in half with an egg weight in the canals and stuff. It's a little big to be tossing to individual fish. Live pinfish, live pigfish, and of course, you can never go wrong when you're fishing with a shrimp, a live shrimp. Now the problem with a live shrimp is if it's summertime or something, you'll have every bait fish out here, every predator fish, between a needlefish, blowfish, to pinfish, just nibbling those legs away. So typically when I'm using shrimp, I'm not putting a live shrimp on a hook and throwing it out there and waiting 10 minutes, because that sucker ain't gonna last 10 minutes, it's gonna last about 10 seconds. So what I'm doing with a live shrimp is I'm sitting there, having my client, when we see a fish, we toss to that fish, so the fish goes from the second it hits the water to the shrimp, and there's no wasted, you know, the shrimp being eaten by pinfish and all that. Now in the wintertime it's a little bit different, because a lot of the predatorial fish, they're a little more lethargic, they're gone, they're not as active, so the shrimp will stay alive a lot better. The other live baits that you can use are fiddler crabs. You could buy mud minnows. Mud minnows are great. That's cotton candy to redfish. You can't go wrong with that. That's up there. The three top baits to throw to a redfish, in my personal professional opinion, are going to be cut ladyfish is one of the best if you're a bait fisherman. A live blue crab, about the size of that right there, maybe a little bit smaller, almost a permit size. That's what they're feeding on. Those redfish, that's honey to them. And then mud minnows work great too. Mud minnows work great for flounder. I mean, apparently they're, you know, when you hear mud minnow, they live in the mud, and these fish are predatorial bottom feeders. Now let's talk about black drum for a minute. Now black drum tend to mostly eat crustaceans and stuff, so that's a good shrimp bait. I've even gotten to the point where I've taken sponges, cut them into about the size of my thumb, and dip the sponge in like clam juice. Maybe take a sponge, put inside there a piece of oyster, wrapped it with a rubber band, put the hook on that. I've tried a lot of different things. For the little crabs, again, work great for them, but that's a process. A lot of people don't do that, and you have to think, I'm also not, when I go out with crab, I don't go out with 30 or 40, I go out with 2 or 3, and I'm throwing to individual fish, and I don't take their claws off until the last minute. You know, too many people are saying, oh, the blue crab population, the blue crab. You know what, if you want to stop and protect the blue crab population, you need to stop commercial fishing out here. This is a national park, and no national park should have any kind of commercial harvest. So there should be no commercial harvest of any species in this state, if you ask me. Between the sea trout that needs to be protected and everything else, you know. There's plenty of other farm-raised fish that we can do in this day and age of technology. So limit that. Unfortunately, people say, well, that's how progress is made in this, that's called the future. So I digress here. So with black drum, mainly crustaceans, shrimp, crabs, fiddler crabs, even sand fleas. Well, I've had some old timers tell me sand fleas work, which is great. Just go to the beach if you can get them and then bring them out here. Haven't tried that yet. That's going to be one of the next things I do. So now let's talk about the trout. Trout are predatorial. One of my favorite lures to use for trout, I mean, live baits to use for trout is a live mullet. You free line a mullet and all that. The problem is I watch too many people put 6 or 7 rods out there, 3 rods. They're sitting back not paying attention. They're letting the, one thing I can't stand is when people say, you gotta let that fish take that. No, because what's happening, he's gonna take it, he's gonna swallow it, you're gonna get it up, you're gonna get it out, and the fish is gonna die. So if you're gonna live bait fish for trout, just keep a hand on that. So the second it hooks, use circle hooks, start reeling so you get a good hook set. So those are the baits. Now let's talk about part 3 here, lures. Now we all know that I use quite a bit of DOA lures, so with all these fish, you know, DOA or plastics or artificials, topwater, skidder walk, rapala, whatever the brand name is, I'm going to leave that to each their own. I've pretty much, there's a video out there that I'm just going to put a link here to on lure selection for catching redfish, trout, black drum, So what I'm going to do is I'll just put a link to that. There's no sense in me going over a redundancy here and explaining this over and over again. But the top lures, the top 3 lures that are my favorite out here on the Mosquito Lagoon are the DOA Bait Buster, Shallow Running Bait Buster, top water. The new Airhead's starting to grow on me. I haven't gotten quite used to it. Believe it or not, the Airhead, I like to put a weighted hook on it with a little bullet weight. And if you crank it fast enough, you keep your rod tip up, it will stay up on top of the water for top water use. But I also like the ability, if I'm sight fishing, I can toss it to an individual fish and let it drop down to him for sight fishing abilities or tactics. And then, of course, number 3 is a shrimp, a DOA shrimp, a plastic shrimp. Especially if you're a good accomplished angler, you have good accuracy in your target shot, you have good technique and tactic. When you're throwing to these fish, you know, it works. It's just like anything, throwing darts, a basketball. It just takes a little bit of practice and all that. So there's part 3, lure tackle selection. We're going to start working on the next one. I'm sorry some of these videos are behind, but it's been a busy year for me. I'm trying to produce them as much as I can. If you're interested in following what I'm doing, just please subscribe to me. And this is the best way to get notified and updates. You can follow me on my Facebook page also. And I want to wish everybody a good fall and a good holiday season coming up. And I thank you very much. Again, it's Captain Drew Cavanaugh with Florida Inshore Fishing Charters. Thank you.